Two excellent American points of view. I'd now be very happy to welcome a European point of view on the issue of cultural diplomacy. Very, very happy to have the chance a second time to include Ms. Silvia Kofler as a special speaker as part of the conference. We had the chance to get to know each other, I think it was about a year ago, for our last conference, I believe, at the German Marshall Fund that we hosted also here in Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, Silvia Kofler currently serves as the spokesperson and head of press and public diplomacy at the Delegation of the European Union to the United States, where she oversees media relations, public outreach, academic and cultural programs, long-term relationship building initiatives, and information products and services on behalf of the European Union. Prior to joining the EU delegation in Washington, Ms. Kofler spent 4 years leading press, public, and cultural affairs at the European Commission delegation in Tokyo. From 2004 until 2006, Ms. Kofler was posted in Brussels, where she streamlined communications efforts regarding EU trade policy. Ms. Kofler also headed press and information operations at the European Commission delegation in Moscow, where she was posted from 2000 until 2004. Ms. Kofler first joined the European communities in Brussels in 1992, working on development policy issues for EU Council for Ministers, before moving to the Council's press office. The topic that she's chosen today is EU external action, the cultural dimension. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in a very, very warm welcome for Ms. Silvia Kofler. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. It was much too long. Basically, I hope you retained that my name is Silvia Kofler and I'm here from the European Union delegation in Washington, D.C. And I'm very happy to speak to you today about cultural diplomacy. Especially happy because what I'm doing this month, and I would say almost years now, is talking about the financial and economic crisis all the time and how we are saving this in Europe. So I'm actually very happy that today I have a much softer topic and a much more pleasant topic to talk about than, again, about the economic crisis in Europe. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about the soft power for which the European Union is well known, because I think you've had excellent speakers on that. I've seen that Secretary Chertoff, Lieutenant General McKnight, Ambassador Simony, and Dobriansky, also Mrs. Lord, they all spoke about this topic. So I think it has been well covered. Instead, I would like to share with you the European vision of what culture is and the cultural dimension of the European Union's foreign policy. And along this, I would like to explain a bit about the European cultural identity, whether there is a European identity, whether there is this cultural identity. Because you probably all know that the European Union is not a single country, it's not even a federation, it's not an international organization either, it is something in between. So we are not just a trading bloc, a trading power or a political bloc. We are also a somehow cultural entity, but not the same way as a single nation. And then I would like to explain also some of our accomplishments and initiatives in cultural diplomacy and where we see cultural diplomacy for the European Union going in the future. So first, what is the vision in Europe about culture? Looking at it from a European perspective, I find the title somehow interesting when you add together cultural diplomacy, national security, and global risk. Because in the European Union, I think we would be much less likely to make such a direct connection between national security and cultural diplomacy. Maybe this is because in Europe, we consider culture from a different angle. In Europe, cultural activities are not considered just as commercial goods or services or as a commodity, as this is done in some other countries. Rather, culture plays a very important role in conveying our European identities and values. And while it's certainly an important element for diplomacy, I don't know that we would consider it as a tool of the kind that I associate with the concept of national security. But I agree that culture is in some ways the strongest symbol of national identity. Countries that enjoy a very strong cultural identity use it as a way to rally support and friendship abroad, to attract interest and to raise their national profiles. And many studies indeed suggest that this is a very effective way of promoting their achievements and values. Now let me say a few words about the European identity or European cultural identity. Given that the EU is made up of 27 countries, sovereign countries, and they all have their own varied and intertwined history, the arts and language, does Europe, in fact, share a common cultural identity? And is it really possible to forge this with, as I said, many languages? We have 23 official languages in the European Union, but we have at least double the number of local languages and dialects. So I believe the answer is yes, because first and foremost, the motto of the European Union is united in diversity. And it means that the European countries came together in the form of the EU to work for peace and prosperity, but at the same time, they are all very proud of their national cultures, their national identities, and traditions and languages. So the cultural identity of the European Union is not based on geography or the thousands of years of history, because the European Union only exists now for almost 60 years. So there's no way that you can compare the two. But our common cultural identity is based on our shared values. We all in Europe agree on the values of liberty, democracy, respect for human rights, the rule of law, and the fundamental freedoms. And since the EU's very beginning, we have had a community based on these common principles, which guide our member states and the citizens, the way they live, they work, and they interact with others, and also in our relations with the wider world. Much of the originality and the success of the European Union stems from this ability to forge common rules that guarantee peace, stability, and prosperity to what for centuries was a volatile and conflict-ridden region. And really, we have to look back here on hundreds of years of history, and not just the last couple of months or now 2 years that we have been going through an economic and financial crisis. So, although this idea of this shared European cultural identity still remains a somehow hazy vision, as some call it the last frontier of Europe, our status as a social and cultural body with cultural richness and diversity is closely linked to our influence and role in the world. So with that in mind, how can the European Union most effectively practice cultural diplomacy? And here let me give you a few examples of what we are already doing and where we want to go in the future. Only last year, I mean in October 2010, 2 years ago in fact almost, the European Union and China launched the first ever high-level cultural forum to strengthen people-to-people exchanges and to foster the mutual understanding between European and Chinese people. So this is the very first high-level forum that we have with another country on strengthening our mutual understanding. But the European Union's action in cultural diplomacy is based on our membership of the UNESCO Convention of the which was concluded in 2005. And that's the UNESCO Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. It's the basic legal framework of the UNESCO body. And we are part of that since 2005. And so since on that basis, in all our relations with countries outside the European Union, we include a cultural dimension. And we also have a European agenda for culture, which was agreed in 2007, that serves as a common framework for our cultural policy and is designed to foster intercultural dialogue, to promote culture as a catalyst for creativity in the framework of growth and jobs. So we are also looking at the economic angle of cultural diplomacy, and also to develop a new and more active cultural role for Europe in our international relations. In the developing world, we support an enormous variety of cultural programs as part of the more than 50 billion euros development assistance that the EU provides with its member states every year. So a big percentage of these 50 billion euros that the European Union with the member states provides in terms of overseas aid, a big part of that is devoted to cultural projects. And I refer here to a few projects. So, for example, we have one in Ghana that encourages the preservation and restoration of heritage sites. We have provided 2 million euros to just that project. Another one would be a festival that we do that is done in Niger, in Mali, to develop sustainable cultural tourism. Or in the Middle East, where we have invested money for partnerships with music schools to support young musicians, provide artistic education, and promote culture among the local population. Or in Colombia, the European Union supports a project to the tune of 2.6 million euros to help create a technical school which promotes the artistic, social, economic, and technical dimensions of arts and crafts. At the same time, we also focus on the cultural dimension of human rights. So for us, this is a part when we promote human rights, which is a very strong objective of the European Union. We also look at the cultural dimension. So this includes, for example, the rights of indigenous people, or the rights of minorities, or the rights of people who are socially marginalized. For example, in Brazil, the European Union sponsored the JAMAC digital cinema program, which organized script writing workshops, conferences, and debates, and other activities focusing on issues relating to violence, human rights violations, and citizenship. And we also share major cultural programs with other international partners. I mentioned the one with China. We started in 2010. And their most recent gathering under this cultural forum, which took place last fall, examined the roles of urban centers, metropolitan governance, and new technology in European and Chinese cultures. I would also like to mention the Anna Lindh Foundation, named after the Swedish foreign minister who was killed several years ago. We give a special support to this foundation as a network of civil society organizations in Europe and throughout the Mediterranean. And this helps to bring together people from 43 countries to promote intercultural dialogue and improve mutual understanding. So if I would like to conclude and look forward at what we are going to do in the future, I would like to mention the European Parliament. The European Parliament is very much driving the action of the European Union for a more active role in cultural diplomacy. And in 2011, it recommended also to set up a special directorate within the new External Action Service of the European Union, within the new Foreign Relations Corps, the Diplomatic Corps, to have a special directorate that is dealing just with cultural diplomacy. As I said, cultural diplomacy is not just a function of the European Union, it's also very much a function of our 27 member states. Yes, they are all very proud, we're all very proud of the diverse cultures and languages and heritages, and each of the 27 countries has developed their own program to promote cultural outreach. And I think you have had a few ambassadors already of the European Union member states here explaining their outreach programs. And so before I close, I'd just like to touch on this topic of enlargement, because as you know, we are looking forward to have a new member country joining next year, which is Croatia. It will be our 28th member state. But we are also in negotiations with Turkey, which is our biggest candidate country, but also with Iceland, and as from today also with Montenegro. And we are also negotiating with Macedonia, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So I just would like to touch on this because cultural diplomacy, that you understand, even if a country like Turkey would join, this would not change, because as I explained earlier, our European identity, cultural identity, is based on the values, on the common values that we share. Any country that wants to join the European Union has to subscribe to these same values. So if Turkey is going to join one day the European Union, they will have to respect, just like the other 27 or by that time 28 countries of the European Union, democracy, rule of law, human rights. So we do not see a conflict there with the enlargement that would bring in Turkey at some point. So if I look ahead of at the future of the EU's cultural diplomacy, or if you want the cultural dimension of our foreign policy, It will continue to be based on these shared values, on the sum of all our cultures, languages, traditions, heritages that all the 27 members states preserve. And final thing, we are moving towards more integration. The crisis that we are currently going through is actually a stimulus for that. It will accelerate. There is no mention in Europe about less Europe. There is only a mention about more Europe. The debate is more about how to achieve that. And in that way, I think we will strengthen both the cultural and other layers and use them as a basis to better convey important messages about Europe, the values that we share, and the experience of building bridges among nations. Thank you very much.